This is the Dwarven Tunnel Project, a series of Dwarven-themed tunnels built below my main base and designed to house a series of contraptions all centered around my super smelter. Well, today I'm going to be expanding this project, adding additional tunnels, contraptions, and even a ravine, so sit back, relax, and enjoy the show. Hey there, how's it going? Welcome back to the Let's Play world. Let's talk. For those of you who are uninitiated, I just spent the last year working on the Westfall project, which is now done. And the presumption was that it now means I can work on the Bedrock project, which is this large area down here. TLDR, I'm replacing the entire floor with black stained glass like so. This is a 400 by 400 block perimeter, and with some rough estimations, I'm gonna need approximately 500,000 glass to get it done. Enter my super smelter. This thing was designed solely because of the Bedrock project, and it should be plenty capable of keeping up if it weren't for the fact that it's actually incomplete. Let me demonstrate. I've got 2 shulker boxes of sand here, and I'm just gonna throw them into the system. Under the hood, a shulker unloader will begin extracting the sand and sending it off to the furnaces, whilst the forge room above has come alive in a fiery blaze of glory. The Dwarven statues all along the hallway have lit up and began pouring lava into the vast expanse below, whilst the Dragon Forge has now awakened from its slumber. Inside its belly, the furnaces are hard at work smelting down the sand, after which it gets brought to a shulker loading station where the glass is repackaged back into shulker boxes ready for pickup. This process continues until all of the items have been smelted, after which the forge will finally shut off and become dormant, waiting to be used once again. Pretty cool, right? But did you notice anything odd? I mean, I've got this incredible room here, an awesome super fast super smelter, but yeah, where do I get my boxes? That's right, currently, if I want to get my boxes, I have to go deep into the bowels of the redstone to grab them out of this barrel. And that's a problem, because if I'm going to be using this thing frequently for the Bedrock project, I'd like to have a proper ergonomic method of actually getting at it. And that is the genesis for today's episode. So here's the plan. I'm going to build some sort of large room off to the side that'll receive the finished shulker boxes and store them for pickup. That way I don't have to spelunk into my Dragon Forge anymore, and I can instead enjoy a formal pickup location. But of course, if I'm going to create a room like this, I'll need a way to get to it, which is why I'm also going to build some sort of connector space to bridge everything together. This connector space will go right outside the doorway here, and the shulker deposit room will go some way back in that direction. Proximity to the super smelter is obviously important, but honestly, the main reason why I'm going to be building it here is because I desperately need a formal entranceway. Because currently, the way that I've been getting down here is by banging my head against the rock, trying to slip my way in on my elytra. And that's less than ideal. So I'm thinking that instead it'd be a lot nicer to just have a staircase that'll take me from my cave system over here and bring me down into the Dragon Forge room. And then of course it'll also lead to the aforementioned shulker deposit room. Now in the past I'd usually just do this design work off camera, but for this one I decided to stream the entire design process live. And here's how it went. I began by loading a backup of the Let's Play world with creative mode so I could then go around and, using World Edit, begin to experiment with different layouts and ideas. Doing this on a backup allowed me to understand exactly how much room I had to play with so as not to accidentally make something too big that wouldn't actually fit. It also allowed me to see how I might be able to connect existing areas together, which led to the idea to make the connector space a large ravine that went all the way down and opened up into the Bedrock project. To decorate this ravine, I designed a number of different wall layouts and motifs that I could then embed into the rock as a sort of structural element slash cool thing that looks cool. These wall layouts were really fun. I basically just freestyled a bunch of different pillar and wall components until I thought I had enough, then mixed and matched them into a bunch of unique combinations. Once they were in place, the next step was to start working on the shulker deposit room, but in traditional me fashion, I got distracted and went off track. Instead, I started working on another connector tunnel that connected my ravine with the kelp farm off to the west. A big inspiration for this one was the Mines of Moria Moria from Lord of the Rings. I like the idea of an expansive, square-shaped room with doorways on every side, creating the illusion that there are other places you can go, when in reality, it only takes you to the kelp farm. After I was satisfied with that, I finally turned my attention to the shulker deposit room, which turned out to give me a fair bit of trouble. There were a number of nearby restraints that kept getting in the way and limited my options for how I wanted to create the layout of the room. My solution ended up with the entrances and pathways high at the top of the room, while the actual depot space sat lower down in a carved out nook. And this, incidentally, also drew inspiration from Middle-earth with Erebor from The Hobbit. Once I was done, I basically had a rough draft for the whole layout, which meant that it was time to go back through and start adding the finer details. This consisted of implementing the lighting, refining the built structures to have more decoration, and spending many hours carving the granite cave systems and walls. It's a step that I wish I could have done with World Edit, but there's a particular verticality to the way that I do it, and I've yet to find a way to replicate that using a tool. So for now, it's something that I resolved to do by hand, and I think it was worth the extra effort. Another thing worth mentioning is I'd been tinkering around with different redstone ideas for the project, and I'll talk about them more later, but all you need to know for right now is that it was during this detailing phase that I made sure everything was implemented and working properly. Always make sure to do this, because I've done plenty of builds where I get things detailed and refined, only to realize that something redstone related wasn't working and I had to completely redesign everything. But I digress. After all the detailing was done, I was left with a solid first draft of the project, which meant that the long road was now in front of me. Because for the next step, I copied the chunks out of the world and pasted them in a super flat design world, where I then spent the next 10 hours methodically removing all the excess material, reducing everything down to just the portions I wanted to build. This would allow me to achieve a clean schematic of the final project, which would not only be easier to build from, but would also provide me with an accurate material list. But before I grab that schematic, the step I always save for last on my projects is the texturing phase. This involves mixing in other blocks to break up repetitive materials. I use terracotta and polished granite for the granite, sand and smooth sandstone for the cut sandstone, and endstone for the endstone bricks. This step also serves as a quality control check to make one final sweep through the project and make sure everything is up to snuff, checking for misplaced or missing blocks, adding in a few last-minute details, and anything else that came up which needed to be addressed. And once that was all done, the project finally had my stamp of approval. I officially called it done and grabbed a schematic. The whole thing took about 80 hours over the course of 14 streams. And the final layout consists of 5 distinct rooms. The first one is the ravine, which will sit adjacent to the Dragon Forge, and though it's unintentional, it admittedly looks rather phallic. Next, there's the shulker deposit room cradling the ravine on its eastern side, then a long connector tunnel which joins both that room, the ravine, and the super smelter down at the south end. From there, it's the Mines of Moria inspired room which connects back over to the kelp farm with a fun little cave system spliced in between. But let's get our attention back to the Let's Play world here, because now I've got to put my survival where my creative is and actually build this thing. I've placed the final schematic in the world here and lined it up with this doorway. So everything, the ravine, the shulker deposit room, it's all here in holographic form, ready to be built. I just need to be able to see it first. Now, when faced with the task of excavating a project like this, it begs the question, how do I want to do that? For the previous 2 tunnels, I simply dug out the entire volume for each schematic. It was simple to follow and made things easier to build afterwards because there was more open space to work with. But that doesn't mean it ended up being the best choice in hindsight. Because this method broke through the surface, I've had to bear witness to the exposed exoskeletons tarnishing the good looks of my world. But more important than that, because there's space around these structures, it also meant I had a ton of extra area that I had to mob proof, which isn't a problem for me, but it does happen to coincide with another issue. It's thankfully hard to see this issue with shaders on, but just wait and see how this looks when they're off. Yeah. Up in the ceiling, you can clearly see all sorts of weird light glitches seeping through the edges of the blocks. My guess is that something in Minecraft's lighting engine isn't quite convinced that diagonally connected blocks will fully block out the light, and so we're left with these weird little patterns that really takes away from the feel of this room. The point is, even if I covered these structures over to remove the daylight, I'd still be letting light through with all the torches. And sure, I could just slab everything instead, but at that point I should just be covering it with full blocks to prevent the issue altogether, which then needs to be mob-proofed again by torches, and I think you see my point. What I'm trying to say is, though it was easier to dig out all the excess volume, it ultimately led to a messier fallout, and I'd like to avoid that this go-around. Instead, my objective for today is to dig out only the area that I'll be building within, kind of like a mold for the build to be cast into. This will prevent the need for mob proofing on the outside, prevent the weird light glitches, require less material to be removed, and overall lead to a build completely encased in rock with no mysteries. Except one. The only downside I can foresee is it's probably going to take longer to dig, since I'll need to be precise and careful every step of the way to make sure that I'm only removing what I need. I have a few ideas on how I'll try to approach this with Lightmatica, but nothing I'm going to know for sure until I just jump in and try it. So without further ado, let's see how this thing goes. Well, suffice to say, I was able to get it done. Everything down here is now exactly dug out to perfectly fit my new tunnels. It's a little wacky in some places, but overall, it's a pretty cool kind of mold for my project to be built into. And everything's here, my big ravine down to bedrock, my soon-to-be shulker deposit room, my connector tunnel over here, and then past that, the Mines of Moria Hall that then connects over to my kelp farm. The process I ended up using to dig it all out involved using a semi-transparent projection of the schematic. This allowed me to both see the build and what I was digging at the same time, which made it easy to isolate the blocks that needed to be removed. Some areas were trickier than others, and it took a little practice to get the hang of it, but more or less my technique involved removing rock until I saw the build, then I stopped. By the way, pro tip, when using this method, make sure to set schematic overlay to false. This will remove the distracting highlights around the blocks and make it easier to see what you're doing. I really enjoyed this process overall. It's definitely slower because you have to be more careful, but the flip side is it's way more interesting than just speed mining a big perimeter, and I think that more than makes up for it. Plus, again, I won't have to worry about mob-proofing the build or deal with any of the other issues I mentioned, since it's all gonna be encased in solid rock. Well, mostly encased. There are a few sections here that broke through the surface, namely the parts that cut into the old river going through my base. And I don't want to get into it right now, but let's just say that I'm pretty much instating a scorched earth policy on my base, meaning that I don't care about ripping out or changing things on the surface because I plan to redo most of this stuff in the future. But enough of that, let me head on into my base of operations, which happens to be next to the entrance that'll take me into my new tunnels. And let's talk about stone. Remember last episode when I was like, nah, I've got too much stone, and I traded away like 95% of everything I had? Well, that didn't last very long. This is a full double chest of shulker boxes of stone. And then I ran out of shulkers and started filling these double chests as well. All in all, it's about 150,000 blocks of stone. And guess what? I don't have any more room for it at my base here. All of my bulk chests are maxed out. Man oh man, whatever am I going to do? Well, isn't this a familiar feeling? Just like old times, I saddled up Zoomer here with all my shulker boxes of stone, and here I am once again dropping it off at the bulk storage silo. I figure that as time goes on, I can continue to use this Mason Villager trading hall as my way of getting rid of extra stone by converting it into emeralds. But I'm not gonna bother doing that right now. I honestly just wanted to use the silo for storage, plus on the off chance that I end up needing some down the road, I'd hate to have traded it all away. Anyways, now it's time to start thinking about building everything. And one thing I've started to do recently is put together the redstone first. That way, number one, I don't have to worry about screwing with it during the time lapse, and number two, so it's easier to show off how it works before I cover it up with decorations. Case in point, I've gone ahead and done that for the shulker deposit room here, and the first thing I want to show off is the actual deposit chest. This is where the finished shulkers from the super smelter will end up. They'll travel via chest minecart along this rail and enter the station to go into the chest. The best summary of what's going on here is, you know how hoppers will trickle items down into a chest from above? Well, this is doing the opposite of that, sending items up to the chest via a dropper elevator. That way the chest can sit flush on the surface without any of the redstone showing. It does this by triggering a clock every time a minecart enters the unloading station, which spams the dropper tower and sends all the items up to the chest. It's a hopper clock, into an observer clock, into a dropper tower. And then the minecart leaves when the circuit shuts off. But that's not all, because what if the chest gets completely full and the droppers start backing up? Well, what you can do is grab the boxes out of the chest, then step on this pressure plate, which will manually trigger the observer clock and send any backlogged items up to the chest. And once it's done, you just switch it back off. I even included a barrel here just to ensure that there's plenty of extra space, and when you add all the droppers and hoppers together with everything, you get a total capacity of almost 2 double chests. So this one little chest has more capacity than meets the eye. But anyways, next up, literally, is a fun little afterthought I had as I was designing the room. Essentially, what you're looking at up there is a randomizer circuit hooked up to 4 different lava dispensers. The way that this randomizer works is it uses 4 shulker boxes. That's right, I had to sacrifice 4 of my shulkers to make this work, and each of them in this dispenser has a different amount of items. The system will continuously dispense and collapse these boxes at random, and based on the contents of each box, the signal will correspond to one of the 4 lines. The design was created by Doomfish, and I'm using it here to give the lava streams a realistic sort of trickle as they flow down into the room below. No functional purpose here, just a fun little aesthetic detail to give some movement to the room. Believe me, it's gonna look sick when everything else is built. Other than that, the only other redstone thing for this project is back at the entrance to my base here, and as you can see, I now have a secret 3x3 piston door with gravity blocks. This is the same design I've been using for years at this point. It was originally designed by DocM, and it's very simple and easy to build. A little bit of quick lore here, I've built this door 3 separate times before this. Once for my AFK fish farm, again for when I rebuilt my AFK fish farm, and one for a secret entrance to an old underground area near my super smelter. What do they all have in common? They've all been torn out. So let's hope that this is 4th time's the charm. Anyways, with all the redstone out of the way, it's now time to worry about gathering the materials, and as far as the big stuff is concerned, I'll need 18 shulker boxes of granite, 11 shulker boxes of sandstone, and 5 shulker boxes of endstone. And you know what's cool about that? I don't actually need to go and gather any of those materials. I've got it all on hand at my base here, all the sandstone, all the endstone, and all the granite. Everything else is pretty much on hand as well. I'll just need to take some time to get it all together and craft a bunch of things up. Okay, took me just over an hour, and here's everything all put together. All the granite items are in the pink, yellow is the endstone, and purple is the sandstone. Some miscellaneous items are over here, and all of this is lava. And I know what you're thinking, really? That was quick and easy to gather? Yes. All you need is a rapid click macro. Anyways, it's time to get started here. So what I'm gonna do is start loading some of my boxes into my ender chest. That way I can keep most of what I need on hand as I'm building. And I think I'm gonna grab this box because I'm gonna start by the kelp farm. I only mentioned this area briefly in the beginning, but this is gonna be a little cave system that sits between my Moria Hall and the kelp farm. And it's one of those things that I definitely didn't need to design. I just kind of let myself get carried away with it, and it was super fun. There are gonna be a bunch of waterfalls, and I even included part of my water stream down there, so I'll actually be redesigning part of it to look like an aqueduct. I'm really excited about everything, can't wait for you to see it. But I digress. I think it'll be perfect to start over here, because this way I can work my way north to my other tunnels and finish the build off over at the ravine, which is my favorite part. But with that, I'm gonna shut up. Well, there it is, folks. 28 hours of building later, and here we are. Everything is complete. A quick reminder about the material palette. Granite is obviously supposed to be the rocky material of the underground area, and sandstone and endstone are supposed to be the building materials, with an emphasis on the endstone being a structural component. There's also some sandstone in the ceiling in the form of stalactites, and this mirrors exactly what I did in my super smelter room over here. And you'll notice other similarities between these areas as I continue to show you around. I wanted everything to feel cohesive, like it was all built by the same dwarves, so there are certain motifs that I made sure to use in every area. The biggest example of this are the doorway designs, a simple little arch like so, with a sandstone hat on top. Everywhere you go around the tunnels, you'll find this exact design on either side of the doorways. It's a nice, simple little detail that ties everything together. But let's back up for a second. Before I give you a formal tour of everything down there, I real quick just want to show you a little something I did here on the surface. Yup, that's right, I finally covered over my structures with stone. I was sick of seeing them exposed on the surface, and I was sick of the lighting glitches inside, so I spent 11 hours and 38 shulker boxes of stone to cover over and encase these things. It worked out really well that I didn't get rid of my reserves over at Westfall, because I literally used every single piece of stone that I had at base here. Was it worth using so much stone to fill these areas solid? No. I could have definitely cut a few corners and it would have been fine. This is just how I wanted to roll. Regardless, the big thing I'm happy about is I have my shaders turned off right now, and there are 0 light glitches to be found, with the exception of the half slabs at the very top, but that's a minor thing and I'll cover that over later when I terraform the area above. But anyways, let's get on with the tour here. And I figured that right here at my base is the perfect place to start, because now if I want to go down into my tunnels, I don't have to sketchily jump down with elytra anymore, and I can just go through my secret entrance. And that will bring me down into an intersection with a lot of choices. This is a placeholder for expansion in the future. This takes you over to my super smelter, this takes you to the depot room, and this actually connects back over into my potions lab. The connection here isn't final, I kinda just threw this together for now, but someday I'll redesign everything and make it look a lot more formal. But anyways, if I make my way down and over to the left, I'll enter a little vestibule space right before the depot room. And if I real quick go off to the side here, it actually takes me into one of the built structures in the ravine. I really wanted everything around here to be interconnected and immersive like that. And case in point, if I go ahead and make my way across the walkway here and over to this doorway, you'll notice that it takes me back across the other side of the ravine and into my super smelter room. From here, if I were to continue through over to the south end, that'll take me into this connector tunnel over here. And if I make my way down doorway 1, 2, and 3, this brings me back over to the end of the ravine. And can I just take a second to say, I love how this turned out. It's my favorite part of the build. I love the different bridges stretching across the expanse, I love the various sources of light coming out of the rooms, and I love how it stretches all the way down to the bedrock project below. And I'll quickly rapid fire a few of the big inspirational images that I used to help me synthesize this ravine. All of these images will be linked down below, and I'll also link my Pinterest board for this whole Dwarven tunnel project if you're interested in checking that out as well. Not everything was designed like that though. This room, for example, was honestly something I kind of just threw together, and I think it actually works really well. I basically had to bridge the gap between the doorways above and the doorways below that connect into my Moria hall. The solution was a bunch of little staircases separated by pillars and a nice little granite walkway to shake things up a bit. Also, there's an important little trick I employed everywhere down here where I hid jack-o'-lanterns behind walls to let light through and mob-proof certain areas. Prior to this, I didn't even know that walls let through light sources, and the only reason I even found out about it was because my boy Time mentioned it to me in chat on stream. Shout out to Time. And I'm not kidding, I use this everywhere. Right here, over there, right there, everywhere. Mainly because I didn't want to spam redstone lamps instead. And by the way, that's another important detail around here. The logic is that the dwarves are very technological, there's all sorts of redstone machinery around the area, and so they only use redstone lamps. And that's why you'll only ever see me use those, or maybe some lava, to light things up. But anyways, let's move on here and check out the Moria Hall, is I guess what I've been calling it. And it's definitely loosely inspired. I was mainly focused on the concept for a spacious hall supported by large pillars, but I'd be remiss if I didn't say that it was on my mind. I elected to keep things simple since everything gets repeated a bunch, and I think that was a good call. I did add these waterlogged stairs as a little trim detail to sort of signify that we're moving away from the lava section of the tunnels and into the water section where my kelp farm is. And other than that doorway and the 4 that hook back to my connector tunnel, every other one is walled off and just for show. Always there if I ever want to expand in the future. But how about I finally show you guys what's going on in here. Again, I definitely went a teensy bit overboard. This was just supposed to be a little connector room, but I thought it would be cool to have some water flowing to hint at where the dwarves are getting it all from, and I think the result was worth it. My favorite thing is I strategically placed sea pickles in the water to not only illuminate the streams, but mob-proof the nearby coarse dirt as well. And of course, this thing right here not only looks like a cool aqueduct, but it actually is one because it's part of the line that transports the kelp when it gets harvested. And honestly, there are so many details and design considerations that went into this whole project that there's simply not enough time to talk about everything. Well, I mean, there is time. I could spend a couple of hours talking about every little block consideration, but I'm gonna choose to plow ahead here and get to the real meat and bones of today's episode. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the throne room, otherwise known as the Shulker Deposit Station. First of all, I mentioned earlier that I took inspiration from Erebor from The Hobbit. The entire carved out section was adapted from a concept sketch that again can both be found in the description and on my Pinterest board. And it's funny because I didn't realize it was for Erebor until after I'd already designed everything, and then I was like, this kind of reminds me a lot of The Hobbit, and then I checked the description and, well, there you go. In a lot of ways, this whole project takes inspiration from Erebor. My large Dragonforge room and my large kelp farm hall both were designed with the ethos to build vast, grand, over-the-top dwarven spaces, just like the ones you see from Middle-earth. And so, with that all in mind, I think it's incredibly fitting to say that this awesome, grandiose throne room is all just here to simply store a singular chest. But hey, that's what Minecraft is all about, right? Building whatever you want for whatever reason you have. And as I make my way into the throne room here, I can get a better look at my lava randomizer. This thing is so cool. It was totally worth the 4 shulker boxes to make the redstone work. It gives a great deal of life to the area, and all the lava that pours down feeds into the river, cutting through the middle of the room. Similar to the water elements I added by my kelp farm, I thought it would be fun to incorporate some lava getting moved around by the dwarves. It gets piped out of the wall, sent along the river to the other end, where it then gets sent into another pipe off to another location. Now, as for the throne itself, I built it around this chest, and initially my design was a lot more minimal, but thanks to a suggestion from one of my viewers, I ended up adding some decorative spikes and some other details to spruce it up and make it feel more like a throne befitting a king. And like I mentioned earlier, all of the redstone is nicely hidden under the floor here, so the minecart will come up the rail in the middle and into the structure and deposit everything into the chest. Also, fun little Easter egg here, I ended up decorating the room inside as well. Totally no reason to do that, but you guys should know me by now. This shouldn't come as a surprise. All right, guys, I think it's finally time to give this all a test drive. I've gone ahead and put together 6 shulker boxes of sand here, and I'm gonna throw them into the system to get cooking. Same drill as before, the forge room comes alive and the super smelter gets to work. The only difference now is the loading station feeds into a chest minecart, and as soon as it receives some finished shulkers, it'll automatically be sent off. All right, there goes the first trip. I have it going straight out through the side of the room, but I kind of completely forgotten about the lava stream that comes down when it's on. So my little band-aid solution here was to use orange stained glass panes to divert it away. And I think it works pretty good since you can barely even tell it's there when you're looking at it from above. Anyways, let me get back up there and wait for the next trip. Oh, there goes the next one. So it's gonna travel across the ravine from one structure to another, make its way out the side wall in the depot room, and go straight down the middle to get deposited at the throne. And the final cherry on top here is the dwarven face in the wall. Just like its brothers in the Dragon Forge room, it's also connected to the super smelter, so the face is on right now because the forge is running. I literally ran a big long instant redstone line all the way from the back of the face over to the super smelter for this to work. So seeing that this is essentially an indicator for the forge, I'm gonna sit here for the next minute or so and wait for the face to shut off. After which I should see one last minecart come down the line, and hopefully, I'll see 6 shulker boxes of sand sitting in the chest. There we go. The super smelter just shut off. Now I just gotta wait. Okay, here it comes. Let's hope this all worked. I'm just gonna give it a minute. Okay. Oh, thank God. All right. There we go. Awesome. Well, folks, get used to looking at this room because I'm gonna be here a lot moving forward. Let me remind you that I'm gonna need 500,000 glass to get the bedrock project done, and this is, rough math, about 1/48 of that. I never give myself an opportunity to be bored, do I? Well, with that, ladies and gentlemen, I'm officially done with today's episode. It's been a long journey, but at last, it's finally time to tell you, for real this time, that in the next episode, I will be completing the bedrock project. No more delays, no more tangents, it's time to get to work. Thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.